Good evening, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
How are you doing tonight? Good, thank you. I'm here from the Rhode Island Second Amendment Coalition of Vice President, the NRI State Association. I'll try to make this quick and painless as possible. I oppose 5155, 5262, 5263, 5345, 5437, 5547, 5554, and 5730. I am for 5156, 5546, 5729, 6039, and 6040. Briefly on the H5155, the magazine ban. After the study was done, after the assault weapons ban in 1994 was basically expired, they found that the assault weapons ban and the magazine ban did nothing to, it didn't make any impact as far as on the criminal side of anything, because law-abiding citizens really don't break the laws. In the bill, it also says that manufacturing in the state, you can only manufacture for government, police. We have a company that actually makes magazines in Rhode Island, so if they can't make them for the public, there's going to be layoffs. And then if they lose a government contract, then we have more people laid off. And honestly, the magazine bans, they do nothing for any type of impact. To me, it's just, feel good legislation, arbitrary number as far as what you can carry. On 5262, it's a rifle, shotgun in the car. What that does is, if you leave the range, come back from hunting, you're on your way home, you get pulled over, you have a rifle, shotgun in your car. Police officer says, where you coming from, and you say, oh, I'm coming from, hunting. Well, prove it to me. Well, I have my gear on and I was hunting. I don't believe you. The way this bill is written, it puts the burden of proof on you. You get arrested, now you're going to have to go to court just for having the rifle in your car, and you're on your way home. I mean, he's not going to follow you to the range to see if you signed in and look down the camera to see if you were actually on the range. You're going to get arrested, and then you're going to have to go to court and prove yourself as, even though you're a law-abiding citizen with no criminal record, you're going to get arrested for it. It's basically entrapment. It's very sketchy on this bill. It's really, it doesn't do anything as far as for the criminal aspect of it. 5263 gets into unlawful for a minor to possess a firearm without a parent or guardian. And then it recites Chapter 20, which at 15 you're allowed to hunt without a parent or guardian. And that would contradict as far as between 20 and with the law as far as barring minors from actually hunting. That's really on that one. Now the school bill, I saw this video on Facebook, and I'm not really that computer savvy, so I tried to save it and it disappeared. But the gist of it is kind of like Groundhog Day with Chevy Chase, where he kept repeating the day. So this video, there was this man, and he was running through the city, and he was running very aggressively like something was wrong. So he runs into this warehouse, sees his loved one on the ground, and had a bullet wound in the shoulder, and she was deceased. He's upset, obviously, understandable. So he grabs a piece of paper, and it has a firearm, and it has a circle, red, and gun-free zone. He puts it on top of outside the building. He runs home. Next day, which is a repeat of the day, he's running, of course, through the town again, runs into the warehouse. Again, his deceased member is on the floor. He goes out and he has this big banner, gun-free zone. Next day, the repeat of the day, he's running again, goes back, and his loved one's still perished. So my point is, gun-free zones are a fantasy. They're not going to prevent a mentally ill or criminal from saying, oh, it's a gun-free zone, I can't commit a crime in there. Then it's nonsense. It's just, it does not do anything but put children and teachers in jeopardy by not allowing CCW holders to carry on school grounds. You take the Orlando case. It was a gun-free zone, the club. So as a police officer arrived, he got shot at, so they grouped outside. It took probably 40 minutes, to what I understand, for them to go into the club. Meanwhile, 30 and 40 people ended up being killed in that time frame. If one carry concealed permit holder was allowed to carry in that club, it probably could have been a different outcome. Now, there was also in Paris, same thing, a gun-free zone. They had the concert. They had 4 off-duty police officers that were there, but in Paris, they are not allowed to carry off-duty. Again, a large amount of people died that day. So I just want you to understand, a gun-free zone does not protect anybody except restrict the law-abiding citizen. It puts people in jeopardy. I just want you to consider that. It's very important that you get this point that I'm trying to explain to you. In the state of Rhode Island, for 25 years, we've had no issues with carry permit holders having any issues on school grounds, whether it was a teacher or principal or whatever. So, I mean, it's really not an issue. Other states like Missouri just went to training their principals and their teachers, if they choose to carry on school grounds. So the country is doing a different direction than what the legislators are trying to do here. So 5437, the color ends with toys. It's very, the definition of it, it covers, and again, I'm not an attorney, but it covers 15 USC 5001, which every time that, to what I understand, if you put in like a US code, that changes periodically and no one will know about it. So it could change in our favor or it could change against us the way the bill should work, and no one's really going to know. The police officers won't know, and it kind of makes like a mess. It needs a better description as far as, you know, what the bill actually wants to do, and I understand what it wants to do. You know, because I've been up here for a while, is if a toy gun has a red end on it, they want it to stay. Where if somebody takes it off and tries to use it as a fake firearm, then they should be prosecuted. And I understand that, but I think it just needs to be rewritten a little bit. Okay, 5554. The Attorney General put this bill in. Transfer through background checks, legally transferred. If you go to transfer a firearm to anyone, you have to go through an FFL. So I don't understand what this bill does as far as, it's already required that you have to use an FFL to transfer a firearm ownership from one person to another. So again, I'm kind of conflicted on that. 5730, another Attorney General bill. They want to charge for a national background check. Well, the Attorney General doesn't have to pay for the national background check, but they want to charge carry concealed permit holders in their application a fee to get the background check done. Now, when a criminal gets pulled over and he gets charged, he goes through the criminal background check, fingerprints and everything. Do we charge them? I mean, really, we should charge them because they're getting in trouble all the time. But the law-abiding citizen who needs it for employment or needs for a carry permit, why do we want to charge the law-abiding citizen instead of charging the criminal? Let's make the cost that it takes to process a criminal. Why don't we charge them the money that the city and town has to expend to take care of something like that? I'm almost done, Madam Chair. 6039, carry conceal bill. The Attorney General mentioned as far as like time frames, 90 days isn't long enough. I had a friend of mine who's had a carry conceal bill, carry conceal permit through the Attorney General for over 20 years. 3 months before his expiration date, he sent in his permit application for renewal. His background's impeccable. Firearms instructor, personal protection person, travels all over the country instructing people. He didn't get his permit renewed until 4 months after it expired. So that was 6 months he was waiting for his permit. And that happens quite often. Now, we want to hold somebody to a standard. Yes, if there's a hiccup and it takes longer than 90 days, I'm sure we'll be understanding about that. But if there is no time limit now, you'll have police chiefs that'll sit on a permit for a year and then say, you know what, I'm not going to process it for you. And of course, again, she mentioned that you have to go to Supreme Court. Supreme Court costs a lot of money. When you go to Supreme Court, they say, yes, we'll hear your case, or no, we'll hear your case. If in our bill, we want to go to Supreme Court, why? Because you're going to get a day in court. Just like your driver's license, just like your construction license, it should be a fair process and a level playing field that you can sit there and say, hey, you know what? I don't agree with it. Win or lose, you should be able to go there instead of going to the Supreme Court. So that's one of our biggest issues. And as far as the application being into law, that's because every city and town will make all different aspects of what they want. You can have Foster where they'll ask for 9 releases so they can go to all the mental health institutions, even though if someone is put into a mental health institution against their will, it goes into the NICS system. We already passed that 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So it will go into the NICS system. It will be there. So, or they want to go into your finances. They want to go into your divorce decree, why you got divorced. I mean, some towns, they're asking for all this information, and really it's not needed. It's not justified. You know, there has to be a standard. Every state has a standard, whether it's a city or town, or it's the state. Massachusetts has, they'll ask a few different things, but the application is basically standard. And it gets issued from the Attorney General, but if it's a city or town permit, the Attorney General will look over the paperwork, but the answer as far as the permit being issued is the city or town police chief. Okay? In Rhode Island, we have some police chiefs that issue, we have some that refuse, we have some that refuse to even give an application. And they come down and they'll browbeat you and say, you don't want an application here, I'm not giving you one, you don't need a permit. And that happens all the time. So there are some that are following the law and some that are not. We want a standard. That's all we're asking for. We want a standardized application, we want a standardized process, we want a fair process to go to Superior Court instead of going to Supreme Court. And I think that's really not a lot to ask for. It doesn't make it any easier for you to purchase a firearm. All it does is make the process as far as getting your carry concealed permit. Now, the state of Massachusetts has 550,000 permits. Now, even though the city and town will issue the permit, the people in Chelsea, the criminal BCI department, will look over the paperwork and then issue the permit to the chief, and then they give it to the person. Now, I know that because I have an out-of-state permit, non-resident permit through Massachusetts, that every year up until this year, now it'll be every 3 to 5 years, depending on your last name. I still have to fill it out every year, but I don't have to interview a fingerprint every year. So, and they have 5 in their department that handles all these permits. So, we should have on the average, if you go with Massachusetts on the average that they have per capita, we should have around 120,000 permits. We have around 4,300, and I think that number is way off than what it should be. Especially on the cities and towns where it's a shall issue. And if you have a good background and you know you're trained correctly and you're qualified, you should be able to get your permit. As far as the Attorney General, when she mentioned about people being out of work, like I said, my friend went through that process. Luckily, he was his own business owner, and he could, not carry, but he could still instruct. But when you have somebody that works for Brinks or whatever, and they put it in a timely manner, and that permit goes over the 4 months after it expired, now he's out of a job. He can't even collect unemployment. And Frank does a lot of unemployment law, which, that has happened. So we need a system, and we need to have time limits. And again, if there's an issue and you have to go over 90 days, all you have to do is call a person and say, hey, we got a couple of bumps in the road, we'll take a little longer. And I don't see anybody not being reasonable about that. But let's be fair about it. Let's not have to go to Supreme Court for it and spend 25 grand, get the decision, and the city and town, like East Providence, still refuses to issue. So, stun guns, I'm for stun guns. I feel that if it was actually went to the Supreme Court of the United States, where a Massachusetts case that said it was they violated her rights to own a stun gun, and she won the case. So I feel as though if a man or a woman isn't comfortable carrying a firearm and they can have a stun gun, I think that would be a great avenue for them to go. So we support that bill. Now the reciprocity bill, the Attorney General mentioned that if someone is driving through Rhode Island, skirting it from, say, through Bristol, Barrington, to go back into Massachusetts, as an example, that if they get pulled over and they're carrying that, they're not going to get arrested. I'm going to guarantee you that they're going to get arrested. Because if they're carrying it and it's loaded, they're violating the law, they're going to get arrested. If they have it in their car and it's has a trigger lock on it and they're going to the range, whether it's in Mass or Rhode Island, they're okay. But if they're carrying it and it's loaded, they're going to get arrested. Rhode Island is going to arrest you, just like Massachusetts would arrest me. If I skirted and went over the Hope Mount Bridge and had to go through Mass a little bit to get to that side of the pond, they would arrest me. That's why I have a Massachusetts permit. They would arrest you if you have a spent shell casing in your car. That's why I have a Massachusetts permit, one to carry and one because I work at Logan. And I have my qualifications and my background check that I have to do every single year with the state police. And if I have a spent shell casing, I'm going to go to jail. That's how tough the laws are in Mass. So, you know, there's a lot of things that come into play when it comes to permits coming over the lines. That's why the reciprocity is important. Gun crime reports. This was last year's Rep. Filippi. This year it's Rep. KCN, Rep. Filippi. I love this bill because 2016 the governor had a panel, and Rhode Island Firearms Owner League stepped up in a general conversation when the public was allowed to speak and did a study on 2014 on all gun charges that were done in the city of Providence, because most of the gun crimes are in Providence. And 75% at that time, the gun charges were dropped. Now in 2013, Representative Mike Chippendale testified that he followed 2010 and 2011, I believe. You'd have to go back to the video and get the dates on that. And that was in the 95th percentile as far as the gun charges being dropped. Now, no one, after 5 years of being up here, on the anti-side, I've never heard anybody talk about the criminals as far as the guns. It's domestic violence, and I understand that, and we're against domestic violence. When it comes to the criminal, I don't hear anyone from that side talking about that. That is a major issue for me when it's 75% or 95% that the gun charges are dropped. And just because that if we have money issues with incarcerating these people, we're going to have to do it, because all they're learning is, all right, I get caught, then they'll drop the gun charge and I'll plead to a lesser charge. I'll do 8 months and I'll be out the door again. So that's something that, you know, really has to change. So the gun crime reports means that they have to come to the Senate and House and they have to explain to them what they've done in the past year as far as how the cases have gone. So I believe in that wholeheartedly. I think that it should be done, some accountability. And that's all I have, Madam Chair. I hope that was quick enough.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Question from Representative Ella Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mike, I have a question for you with regards to the stun gun.
Yes, ma'am.
So, to understand that you are in agreement with the layperson having a stun gun, any provisions for them to have training? Because I was under the impression that our law enforcement officers had to have special training on the use of stun guns. At least they did. I'm pretty sure they did in Warwick.
I'm not sure as I don't believe that you could carry that type of stun gun that the police officers carry. I think it's a handheld, if I'm correct, and I would have to get back to you on that. But with the ones that they have is basically like a firearm, and it shoots out with two prongs.
The two
I don't
prongs.
know if the federal government allows you to carry that type. That I'm not sure. That I would have to find an answer for you.
Can I continue with that question? Thank you, Madam Chair. So when this bill, what is it, 5156 is talking about stun gun, what is there something else that I'm missing other than what the police carry with training?
They have like handheld. I'm not sure that on the training on it. That's something that we would probably have to discuss, I guess. There is a license, a provision, I guess, that's put in for it. So I don't know if how the licensing part of it would work again.
Okay. And then there was, I know that you carry concealed. How long have you had your CCW?
6 years.
Are you an instructor also, Mike?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask you something. There was testimony that was given earlier this evening that kind of struck me by surprise, that if a person is firing a weapon, that its expectation is that 3/4 of the rounds would go awry, that they would only have a 25% accuracy shooting. It's my experience with the CCW carriers that I know, and as you well know, my father-in-law is an instructor as well. Typically, CCW carriers train. Part of it is the enjoyment of shooting. Right. Only 25% of the bullets would hit their mark.
Sure
that seems awfully low to me.
Police officers also, I'm not sure on that. But I can tell you from me personally. I'm an NRA range safety officer. I'm also an NRA pistol instructor. I also take carry classes. Mm-hmm. I also take defensive drill classes. So with my instructor, he gets your stress level up from real world situations that he's been in the military when he's served our country. And I practice a lot at home, dry fire.
Dry fire, right.
I do a lot of from the holster out. I train in his classes because to me, as a carry concealed permit holder, it's my duty to me to train as much as possible. That's just my opinion. I think that a lot of people do it. I know a lot of people do it because I'm in the community and we all train. I like it when I get my stress level up because I think it'll be easier for me. I don't know what will happen if a situation comes up. A military person can freeze, a police officer can freeze, I can freeze, but that's why I train. So no matter what the situation is in anyone's life, whether it's carrying or even an everyday life, if someone gets robbed, how they're going to react when someone's holding a knife to them, you don't know until that day is at your doorstep. So that's all I can say as far as that. I train, a lot of people train. So
the other bill that you had spoken about has to do with I think it was 5730, the cost of the 2 additional checks that the AG's office is encouraging. I think that your point was very well taken, that you already have people that are undergoing those types of checks and they're not required to absorb the cost. Do you have any idea what the cost is, though?
So what we had a conversation with the Attorney General last year, and they said that it doesn't cost them any money when they run to the FBI for a check. That's what I was told.
Okay.
So if they're not being charged, then why do you want to make a profit on me, but then make the criminals pay also for the checks that you're running when they get pulled over and get arrested?
So do you, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but do you feel that that's just another ploy as a deterrent for the concealed carry holder?
Like the city of Providence has a $265 or $275 processing fee. That's non-refundable whether you get the permit or not. And to what I understand, the way it's explained to me, that's against the law. It's $40 upon issuance of the permit. So that's a deterrent because he really doesn't want to issue permits and he wants you to go to the Attorney General.
To the AG's office. As you know, because you assisted me with the ordinance that we put forth
Yes,
in
ma'am.
the city of Warwick, that's exactly what was happening. $200, $160 was non-refundable, and of course the other game was saying to the applicant, it doesn't look like you're going to get your permit, so why don't you withdraw? But they still keep the money, and you don't have to pay the extra $40 because they didn't issue the permit.
That's also happened with the Attorney General probably 3 years ago. I was hearing a lot of stories where people that would have their permits for 20 years and they still own their business and they still have the same reason for why they have the permit. And they're saying, you know, if you just remove your permit and take it back, we're not going to deny you. It won't be a denial on your record. The guy's had the permit for 20 years. He still has the reason why. You know, and also when she talked about the automatic renewal, the automatic renewal should be, to what we see it as meaning is, the person has the same background, the police chief signs off saying, hey, there hasn't been any incidences at his house, because the Attorney General sends a letter to their chief and says, do you have any problem with this person in your city or town?
Right.
Has there been calls that there's a lot of drunk issues, even though there's no charges or whatever? I mean, that would give them a fair reason. If they're completely, you know, constantly going to the house saying, you know, the guy's drunk all the time, whatever, maybe you shouldn't issue a permit. I mean, that's fair.
Right.
You know, if there's, you know, domestic issues and no one gets arrested, but they know there's a lot of problems at the house, I can understand. Okay. But as far as if nothing has changed and everything is right and the chief signs off on it, then he should get his permit. He shouldn't have to wait 4 months for it after it expired.
Right.
So, I mean, they did make a change in November, the Attorney General, where on the renewal that you have your 3 references, but you don't have to have your reference letters notarized or the letters, and then you don't have to be fingerprinted because they already have your fingerprints. So that's a great change in the positive, and I thank the Attorney General for that. Matt and I have talked about it, you know, because we have sat down with Peter Kilmartin on certain things and what we'd like to see, and you know, some they agree, some they don't. So.
And as you know, Warwick doesn't issue, obviously, as much as the AG's office is, but putting the time requirements was not overly burdensome on the Board of Public Safety. In fact, knowing that they had to meet those requirements moved things right along for them as well. Thank you for your testimony tonight, Mike.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, I'm sorry. I think...
I'm sorry. Representative?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what I heard you say earlier, and going back to the school gun-free school zones, it sounded like what you're trying to say is that the very thing that the anti-gun proponents who are attempting to create here the gun-free zones, the very thing they're trying to prevent is what they are kind of bringing about, sort of like a self-fulfilled prophecy kind of thing. So, in other words, where you see the URI campus police, they are carrying firearms. So, and
that took years for them to be allowed to carry that also.
Yes, and so it creates a safer environment, right? So here in the State House, of course, the Capitol Police here, they carry firearms, so we have a safer environment. And again, if we have a parent who is in a situation where somebody may be about to assault their kid, and the parent comes up, say, for example, and says, hey, you know, get your hands off my kids, leave my kid alone, that perpetrator might not exactly take that parent serious, but if they're holding a firearm, they're going to take the parent serious now, aren't they?
Yes.
So chances are, yeah.
The circumstances, it would have to be a threatening manner for the person to pull their firearm with a knife.
Well, yes,
something.
Yeah. But I'm saying it gives that, I can't even think of the right word, but it gives the parent more credibility, anyway, with being able to enforce some sort of action if the child is hurt. So it creates more safety, in other words. Not that the parent wants to go and just pull a gun, of course not, but it gives the feeling of more safety for the parent and the child, that family.
My position that I believe, and I've looked at, you know, a lot of things I'll see from sites like Crime Prevention Center, just Dr. John Locke, who's done a tremendous amount of research. They've tried to debunk him, and it's never stood up. His work always stands for what it is. When you have a gun-free zone like the Aurora Theater, where he went by, and he said that he went by 6 different theaters that weren't gun-free to do the gun-free zone. Because that's a target-rich environment. That means that he's going to have no opposition. So that's where tonight I'm, expressing that if it's a gun-free zone, it only stops me. It doesn't stop the criminal. It doesn't stop the mentally ill. It doesn't allow the teacher or the principal, or as Jerry Miller likes to say, he always picks on the lunch lady. The lunch lady to carry. I mean, you could have, ex-police officers who have turned to teaching that have been. Sometimes they'll be on the police department for 5 years. I know this, and then they'll go to teaching instead. They're still qualified and trained, just like an ex-military person is. Or somebody like me. I'm ex-military, but I also train, monthly, and I train weekly, but I train monthly with my instructor, and I try and be the best person I can be when I carry.
Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that by creating the gun-free zones, the very thing that these proponents are trying to prevent is what they are, it's actually creating the outcome, potentially, of this happening, because...
It's a less safer situation, if that's what you're getting at. If you make a gun-free zone, I think it's less safe than it would be if it's...
That is what I'm getting at. That's, yes.
I agree with that, yes.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Representative Knight.
Sir, if you have a gun-free zone that's actually gun-free, right, there's no firearms, would you agree with me there's not going to be a risk of an accidental discharge?
There's going to be a risk of an
There's not going to be a risk of an accidental discharge?
I don't agree with that.
So if I have a gun-free zone, let's say I have a 100-foot by 100-foot square area that you and I can both tell there's no guns in that area, and a person's in there. Is that person going to be the victim of an accidental shooting from a gun in that zone? They're not, because we've just agreed there's no guns there. So a gun-free zone, right, it may not... Let's put it this way. I guess my comment is this. When you have schools that do not have guns, you reduce and indeed possibly eliminate the risk of accidental shootings, accidental discharges, mishaps that involve the firearm that have nothing to do with the shooter, but have everything to do with the presence of an unsecured weapon around children. Everything in your testimony tonight revolves around a single scenario of maybe a shooter, maybe a bad guy in the situation. But there are other scenarios that are just as dangerous, which would be prevented by having by adding schools to our list of places where we do not allow guns.
To answer your question, 2 things come to mind. There's only been, I believe, 2 accidental discharges in the country. One was Utah, and one I think was Alabama, and I'm not sure on that. But I think there's only been 2. Okay? Now, in Rhode Island, there hasn't been any. And as far as a gun-free zone, yes, that gun-free zone if there's no firearms in there, but when the mentally ill and the criminal shows up, it's not a gun-free zone anymore.
That's not the scenario I'm talking about. And I would have to take...
But that's what I believe. That's my point. That a gun-free zone will not protect you when it comes to the crazy person. I mean, you're taking security and you're knocking it down. You're knocking it down to 0.
Well,
that's what I believe. I'm sorry, sir.
I hear you, and you and I are going to have a difference of opinion on that. But
yes,
to your earlier point, I mean, accidental shootings, I'm just talking about accidental shootings in general, not... So are you saying that you only know of 2 accidental shootings ever? I mean, certainly we...
Discharged in schools.
All right, so I'm talking about accidental discharges all over the place. I mean, we know that firearms and accidental discharges cause injury in our country, and we know that it happens a lot for all kinds of various reasons. And again, I'll just go back to my basic point. There has to be a balance between the public health problems associated with the presence of firearms in our public in our community and the rights of the Second Amendment rights of our citizens. It can't just be an either or. And I think that, folks who have concealed carry and carry out there and train assiduously for that situation that hopefully never comes, but one day if it does come, you'll be prepared. Folks who engage in that practice we just don't have enough of them in our community to make a substantial dent and make a difference statistically in any sort of gun-related violence. And so everybody who gets up there and gives me the good guy with a gun argument is the best defense against a bad guy with a gun fails to recognize the fact that we simply do not have a concentration of good guys with the guns in our community to make a statistical dent in our gun violence problem. And if that's the case, if that solution won't work, because mathematically it won't, the public officials who have to make up the rules to create safe spaces in our communities have to look at different solutions. And so what we're trying to do here with a lot of the gun control measures that are on tonight is try to find a way to minimize that risk of gun violence, because we cannot count on the good guy shooter being able to stop a situation. There's just not enough of them.
Well, I disagree on part of your point, okay? There's 14.5 million carry concealed permit holders in the country.
And there's 350 million people in the country.
Let me finish, please. There's 750,000 police officers in the country. So on average, they'll deal with 1,000 people as far as arrests during a year. That's really stressing the police departments out. Now, with the 14.5 million, if you look at the studies that have been done, the more carry concealed permit holders in a state, the crime rate drops. Now you look at Chicago, that's the best examples of gun-free zone. Because up until 2 years ago, you couldn't even own a firearm in Chicago until they went to the Supreme Court and allowed the law-abiding citizen to own a firearm. Now every year, the average is 550 murders with firearms. Last year was 750. And that's in a gun-free zone. That's your gun-free zone you're talking about. That's where I believe the difference is.
But you're equating causality with gun-free zone. I mean, Chicago's got other problems, not the least of which is a proliferation of straw man buyers out there that are flooding the streets with those guns. So it's a gun-free zone on the books, but you have straw buyers who are flooding the streets with illegal firearms and arming everybody to the teeth, and people are taking out their beefs against each other. That's why you have murder in Chicago through the roof.
The law-abiding citizen is the target.
All right, Representative Knight, Michael, can we declare this horse dead? And
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry, I got lost in my back and forth.
How many minutes ago?
I apologize, Chair.
Briefly, Chair. Whip Filippi wants to breathe some life into the dead horse.
I just want to go on record.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just want to let you know. Okay.
That I agree with Representative Knight that we do not have enough CCW holders, and that we should liberalize this process to make it easier for law-abiding citizens to concealed carry. Thank you.
Sure, Representative McEntee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make this comment. You were talking about gun-free zones probably a half an hour ago. And one of the comments you made was about the shootings in, I think it was Paris, and probably the one in Florida, that was in the bars. You have to, I can't imagine anyone saying that alcohol and carrying a gun in a bar room is a good idea. So I can never even think of one instance where I would say it's good to have, anybody with a gun other than someone on duty law enforcement in a bar room, having a good time, having a few drinks. It doesn't make sense to me. So that
well, I understand
example
your point,
just doesn't
I go
fly.
out all the time. The restaurants, I go out to bars. I don't drink.
Well,
when I carry,
I don't know. That's possible.
It's just, everybody knows that you have one drink. It doesn't matter how much, you're already broken the law.
Well, that's fine, but my point is, I just want to make my point. You've been able to make your point for the last half hour. So my point is, if somebody's most of the time when we see issues with guns in Providence and whatnot, you'll see it's coming out of a nightclub. And whether they're legal carriers or not, that's a whole other story. But I just don't think whether you're a legal carrier or an illegal carrier, mixing it with alcohol is just a bad idea. And that's it.
There was one thing to 5 months ago in South Carolina. There was a gentleman that walked into a club and he shot 3 people. Carry concealed permit holder wounded that man and stopped the mass shooting. That's in the local news if you want to look it up, but that has happened. So there are cases where the carry concealed permit holder has saved lives. So.
Thank you.
Okay, all good testimony. It's 9:15. We do have to move this along. Any further questions for Michael? No? Thank you.